We're going to move on right now to our panel discussions. So we're going to invite all of the speakers to come and participate in the panel. And I'm going to ask anyone who's interested in asking a question of the panel that you'd like them all to answer to share those in chat as well. And we'll look at adding those to the lineup of questions that we currently have. So right now, we're going to invite all the speakers to turn back on their cameras, and we will start the panel discussion. Perfect. All right, so here's the first panel discussion that I have for the speakers, and I'm going to start this one with David, if you don't mind, since you're the first one to speak. We'll bring you back in the fold. What are the most critical changes that we should make to face the future effectively?
Oh, wow. I think we talked about a lot of them today, but I think as an overarching theme, what's so interesting to me is the idea that you cannot take what you already know and squeeze it into what you think is the future. And, you know, I think back to my career and the things I've experienced. Back in the day, I worked in the news business, and newspapers who tried to take what they knew about newspapers and put them online failed. And during the beginning of the internet revolution, advertising agencies that took what they knew about advertising and squeezed it onto the web generally failed. So as we're moving forward, we all have to do what I think every one of us talked about over the last couple hours, is reimagine what's possible and really be thinking about how we can take the best aspects of the medium we're using and use those to create a fabulous experience, rather than try to recreate what we already know and already did in an in-person world.
Agreed. Gavin, do you have anything to add to that? Critical changes that we should make to face the future effectively?
I think there's really two things to add on to what David just said. And actually, I think Nicole and Idoia mentioned several as well that were quite profound. But the first one I would say is, think about things from the customer's point of view. Most big companies are so inward, outward facing that they start with their products, their solutions, and then the question is, how do we tell our story the best, right? I think the biggest change we have to make in order to, I think, leverage this digital transformation is think about it from the customer's point of view, because they are in the driver's seat. And they, as Nicole said, they are going to navigate wherever they want to navigate, no matter what we tell them to do or try to get them to do. And they're going to learn what's interesting to them. That's a big change. And I think the second is to reevaluate what it means to think about risk. Most people today think about doing new things as risky. What we've learned is not doing new things is more risky than actually trying things. And I think that's really where we need as strategic thinkers to evaluate the risk of status quo now more than ever is much higher. And doing experiments is fine. We have to think about how to institutionalize this change rather than just experiment to experiment to experiment. So those are the things I would say are important for us to change.
Nicole, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was like, that really resonated what you said. It's a lot of what I was going to say. And just, we looked at it as an opportunity. I think it's hard during a pandemic to be positive, but it was such an opportunity because it launched us forward digitally. We had to do it eventually. It forced us to do it really fast, but holy cow, did we learn a lot in the last year. So just being open to rethinking things that we've done for 30 years already from the ground up. And like you said, David, it's not just a smaller version, it's a totally different experience. You have to completely rethink it. Yep.
Idoia. Anything that you would make to face the future effectively different? That's okay. We did actually have an additional question come in from a gentleman.
Sorry, I was muted, excuse me. And I was playing with my, I think that everything has been said. I think from a much broader perspective, we have to keep in mind the next generations. And I see that already with my children. They are extremely digitally savvy. They're amazing. Now, when you talk You ask them to pick up the phone and to call someone and to speak up. They're incapable. And they're having a lot of issues to voice their feelings, their concerns, their opinion in a way that is not digital. So that's where I think that from a broader perspective, we all have a role to play in building our future society and the countries. So I think that digital is amazing. We have to embrace the digital transformation, but at the same time, we have to be aware of the threats that some of them are bringing to our next generations as well.
Thank you, that's well said. We did have a question come in from a gentleman named Ramon, and I think this is a great question to ask all of you because it talks about how things are changing from in-person to digital. He actually says he's been to the automation fair many times. That's awesome. He said he's always liked the opportunity to touch and feel new products. I'm sure I'm not the only one. How does Rockwell or any manufacturer overcome these hurdles?
Yeah, so Ramon, maybe you've seen this, there is a really fun demo that we have in person. It's for a light curtain sensor where you stick your hand in and it goes zzz, and it always scares people. And we just love working that booth and watching everybody get scared. And I'm sure no one forgets about how great our light curtain works, but you obviously can't do that digitally. So the next iteration of our virtual event, what we really want to add on and what we weren't able to this time, it just wasn't in scope in 8 weeks. If you guys scanned the QR code that Gavin had up earlier, Kaon does some really, really cool stuff with 3D virtual tours around a product. You can blow the product up. It's never going to feel the same as actually touching it, but it's almost cooler because you can see inside of it and you can get details on how stuff works that you couldn't just see by touching it. So I think that's another thing that it's just not going to be exactly the same. It's going to be a little different and maybe better in some ways and different in others.
Gavin, do you want to follow up on that one?
Sure, I think Nicole touched on it, but one of the reasons I think this is one of those interesting points that David was talking about earlier is you have to sort of reimagine things. People like to do things that they like to do, right? And when you can't do them, you say, I want to go back to the way I like to do it. But the reality is, what the value, I think, in sometimes of being in person at a trade show is to talk to people, get a sense of the products. And sometimes you're going to touch and feel it. But most of the time, you're not going to take apart these very complex, sensitive pieces of equipment. You're not going to move them around. They're too heavy. So really what you want to do is learn more about it. And I think we've become attached to the ways that we've learned in the past, and we're nostalgic for that way of doing it. But I think if we step back and say, what do we really need to learn? The question is, what other methods are there to learn the kinds of things Nicole was talking about? You can take things apart digitally. Maybe there are ways of creating other experiences with virtual reality and augmented reality that you can apply to these that actually give you maybe as much, if not more information. It's just different. And I think that's part of this change is we have to embrace different. Some things we want to keep, obviously, and as I always talked about with people, we don't want to lose our humanity. But I think the fear of jumping onto that train as it's moving is overcome dramatically when you're on the train and you realize what a fantastic new world this is. So I don't think we have to completely leave everything behind, but I think we have to open our minds to saying, how can we really achieve the objective in a different way?
Yeah, and sorry to add on, I know I already answered, but I used to be a teacher. I'm a teacher by trade. And one of the ways we learn is through touch, through tactile, and you really do lose that digitally. So I think that's something for all of us to consider is, like Gavin said, maybe it's AR, VR, maybe it's mailing a little demo kit and they put it together with you on a call. Like, we're going to have to get creative because that is definitely a way we intake information as humans, and it's different online. Sorry.
Absolutely. No.
Idoia, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to share, I participated to another conference whereby we had a speaker who comes from the university in the Netherlands, and he was sharing how they have now integrated AR and VR in anything, in the way they teach to their students at university, and that they have some experiences that they have realized that it's better for the students to do it virtually or digitally, and while others they still have to be in face-to-face. And an example was with future doctors. At the end of the day, they have to be able to understand and to listen to their patients, but at the same time, there are some expertise that they can try virtually, which is going to be less dangerous than if they do it physically. So I think it's combining, again, the best of both possibilities.
We just got a chat in from one of the attendees, from Catherine, saying Chris Stable was the Erasmus University Rotterdam was the speaker for that, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he explained that learning style is a preference, a choice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very interesting.
Hello. Hello, Catherine.
David, did you want to add something to that?
The one thing that I think we need to all think about is going beyond company to customer / prospect and bring a peer-to-peer interaction in. I love all the ideas we've shared around how companies can interact, and I learned a ton on this event as well that I'm going to take to some of my clients. But an important aspect of an in-person event is when people meet at the cocktail hour, or they meet at the, you sit down at a random 8-person round lunch table, and you end up having a fantastic conversation with the people that you've randomly sat next to. And I know that there's a number of ways that some of the platforms have built this kind of thing in with breakout rooms and whatnot, but they can seem a little forced. So I'm just wondering, it's more of a statement that this would be a great thing to have. I don't have an answer to it, but I would love to see going forward in the future how we can move from almost exclusively company communicating to existing and potential customers, and back and forth to true peer-to-peer connection around products as well. Can someone who's thinking about buying a product have conversations with somebody who already owns it, which frequently happens at the in-person events?
That's a great point. So what are some of the most interesting B2B trends you're seeing in 2021? What are some things that are going on in the industry that have been unique and different and changing the way that we're looking at things? Idoia, do you want to start?
Oh, that's a tough question.
No pressure. No pressure.
What I see for the moment in our industry, in the event industry, you mean?
I'm open either.
In the event industry, what I see is still, if I had to use an image, I think of a rabbit who is completely paralyzed at night in front of a car because of the lights. And it's a horrible image, but at some point, and we discussed it in the session that Catherine was referring to earlier in the chat, we are expecting for some sort of the new normal to come back, to be able to travel again. In our industry, there's a lot of stakeholders which business model depends 100% on in-person events. I'm talking about the conference centers, I'm talking about hotels, I'm talking about catering companies, etc., transportation companies. So this industry has been heavily touched by this COVID. And the decision does not depend on the stakeholders. It depends on the government and how fast the vaccination will go. And then how easily people will travel again. So I think that for the moment in 21, we're still looking at what's going to happen. I think that we're becoming quite risk averse still. We're staying quite risk averse after how much we suffered in 2020. And I think that if we look at conference centers or big exhibition halls, they're again looking at how they can repurpose their space in a way that they can also be an interesting offer for smaller events. And they are also investing a lot of money, especially in Europe. I know it's not the case in the US, but in Europe, in anything related to Wi-Fi and bandwidth, etc.
Nicole, you want to add on to that? What are some of the most interesting trends you're seeing in 2021 for B2B?
Yeah, I think it's getting more personal. Like B2B used to be kind of like, I'm wearing a tie, and like it was stuffy and professional. And whereas B2C, we always were very jealous. We're like, oh, Oreo gets to do those fun commercials, like, but I think we're becoming a little bit more like B2C now, because we're realizing that these businesses are made of humans. And that's become really apparent just, I think, during the COVID-19 crisis. Like, we're all people, we're all like at our houses with our kids, and like our dog is poking his head up, and I don't know, I think it's humanized B2B a little bit more, and it's given us some opportunities to make the way we communicate with our potential customers. I think you were just saying this, David, like it's more like talking like a peer than it is, I have the best advice ever and I'm going to come in and tell you exactly what to do. And it's just changed the way we sell. It's more consultative, it's more conversational. I don't know that I have an answer for what that's going to mean by what it looks like, but that's what it's been feeling like, and I like it. I hope it stays like this.
If I can jump in, I think you're absolutely right, Nicole. Bravo, by the way. And I'm seeing a ton of that right now. The typical B2B company would say, we're the flexible, scalable solution for improving business process using cutting edge technology and innovative people. And it's like, what the hell does that mean?
I think you just read our boilerplate. Did you just read our boilerplate?
I was going to say mine too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know what? If you're talking like that, you're not doing what Nicole just said, because humanizing it specifically is a few things. Number one, it's having a conversation with someone as a human, not as a robot. And, specifically, I actually did an analysis of all those big $10 words that B2B companies use. The most overused word in B2B, based on my analysis, I looked at 770,000 press releases sent in the English language over an entire year, is the word innovative. Yet almost every B2B company feels the need to say they're innovative. The problem is, when you say you're innovative, you're not human. And you're also not innovative if you use that word, because everyone uses it. The other manifestation that I see all the time is inane stock photos to represent customers or employees. And I would say to everyone who's listening in right now, if you want to do something literally today to help to make your B2B business or B2C for that matter more human, is to identify when you're using stock photos of people and have a plan in place within the next couple of weeks or months to eliminate all of them. And then go through all of your website copy and other marketing copy and look for those big words, flexible, best of breed, innovative, and look to eliminate those as well. It's remarkable how just those two little things can do what Nicole just said, which is to be more human.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I totally agree. Thank you. Gavin, thoughts?
I think that is the big trend, is the humanization and the blending of B2C and B2B from a marketer's perspective and from a sales perspective. I was meeting with actually the chief executive of a very large corporation, and he said, our big challenge is our sales teams are in these meetings, either virtually or in person, and they're not connecting with the audience. The audience is on their mobile phones, they're on the computer, they're on their tablets. He said, can you build a technology that's going to solve that? And I said, no, the answer is for you to be on their mobile phones, their computers, and their tablets, right? Because that's where they are. So don't try to change them, just try to understand them and then be where they are. So that's sort of the strategy, is to meet them where they are, rather than trying to get them to come to where you are, I think. And that's what the B2C market does very well. And so I think that really the blending of the B2B and the B2C mindset is the biggest trend. I do think that we're going to really need to understand our customers better, because all of these marketing analytics tools, I think they slice and dice customers by demographics, but they don't really understand motivations. Everyone talks about buying intent, but that's the notion is really what is the personal motivation to do something, not what your role says. But you can tell Nicole is an innovator, even though that is an overused word, as a human being. She wants to change, she wants to drive change, she wants to do things differently. Forget her work. That's who she is, right? And I think that's really important to understand, is who the person is and what's driving their behavior, rather than just what role do they play.
Perfect, thank you. And Nicole, thanks for chiming in on the chat too. We did have a question came in. What should we be replacing our stock photos with? Right, was the question. And so, we at Kaon, you try to use a lot of human people interacting, touching, engaging with our solutions, actually playing with them and touch that realisticness that comes with someone truly being in that moment, in that environment. So thank you for sharing on that, Nicole, I appreciate it. The last question we have for the panelists, and we'll start with Gavin. I think we haven't started with you yet. Beyond events, what's the biggest challenge you're facing at the moment?
Well, I think the biggest, most humans, I don't think deal with uncertainty very well. And I'm mostly human, so I think I'm falling into that category too. And I think the biggest challenge is not knowing. There was this term that came around in June or July of last year, the new normal. There is no such thing as the new normal. I just think what we have is what's next. And then something that's coming after that is going to be different. So I think the biggest challenge that I think all leaders and associates in companies and as individuals are facing is we can't really plan the way we used to plan. We just have to find ways to be adaptable so that we don't lose sight of our principles. For example, going back to the office, one of the big challenges we're facing is we don't know what people want. We know what they say they want, but that doesn't mean that's what they want. Do they want to stay at home? Do they want to go back to the office? Do they want to do it part-time? People, I think, are going to evolve constantly. So I think the biggest challenge that I'm facing is figuring out how to make sure that we're still serving our customers' needs, making sure our employees are doing as well as can possibly be done, can have the best experience they can have as team members. They're developing professionally, everybody's being taken care of without having to know what's next. Because if we realize that, I think, if we figure out a way to manage that, I think we'll learn a lot. And I'm not necessarily struggling with that, but that's one of the issues that I think, I don't have all the answers to.
Anyone else want to chime in there? Struggles that are going on for them?
Talent. I think that one of the issues we're going to be facing in the future is beyond the events, is really hiring and retaining the right talent that go beyond a professional experience and or studies, and that have the capacity to learn fast, to adapt quickly, to be diverse, to understand different cultures, and that's difficult to find. So that's something that I think that the digital transformation has even accelerated that even more than what it was before COVID. And we see already some talent that did not survive with the digital transformation, and it was not because of age, which is what one could think naturally. It was more in the capacity or the lack of capacity to adapt to the new reality. So, and those skills, I don't think you can learn them at university or at school. So those are natural skills that come from the personality and eventually the education. So that's going to be complicated, I believe.
I'll jump in. I run a business of one, so a little bit different, perhaps. And a couple of things have been going through my mind, if I can allow myself to get personal here. I spent nearly 2 decades doing something like 30 or 40 in-person speaking gigs a year. I've spoken in 46 countries, all 7 continents. And when the whole world stopped spinning in March, I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And so I dug into this idea of virtual events, and it's been super fun. I now find I kind of like not getting on airplanes, and I kind of like being at home with my wife, and I'm kind of into it. So I don't know what's going to happen when we can get back on airplanes and do in-person events. I'm thinking I'm going to just need to be more picky and choosy and choose the right ones. And another thing going through my mind is that last week I turned 60, and I've been doing a lot of soul searching, if I may say it that way. And I've come up with this kind of rubric for how I'm thinking about my life. The first third of my life was about learning. The second third of my life was about acquiring a family and wealth and knowledge and so on. And the final third I've dedicated to giving back in many different ways. And that sort of helped me to get over this big fat round number that I reached last week.
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Birthday, David.
Yeah. Nicole, you want to wrap it up for us?
Sure. I guess like mental health, and I know that's broader than events by far, but it's all employees. I think the way that I work with my team is so different, not just literally how we work together, but I know more about them. We know David just had his birthday. He probably wouldn't have told us that before. Like, just the way we work together is so very different, and keeping my mental health in control and still wanting to be a good employee, that is really the biggest challenge for me right now.
I appreciate that. I think a lot of people are going through that right now too. So thank you. So I appreciate it. That wraps up our panel for this session right now. And I think what we've all kind of articulated and talked about a lot is there's a lot of changes. There's the old way we were doing things, and then there's the new way we need to start looking at reinventing and developing things.